What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and good old Disney has had another disastrous backfire with a new blockbuster hopeful film. This time it's Shang-Chi getting completely demolished by the Chinese audience that it was likely meant to appeal to in the first place. Although I haven't seen any information on that yet, so it's just speculation or speculative. Certainly we could go back and look at a film like Mulan and know that they were expecting a big Chinese box office, and that backfired in their face, and I love it. Disney has long abandoned the Western market and really only cares about the big money they can make there, because Americans just don't go to the cinema as much anymore. And really, I don't blame them. Whether it's a chicken or an egg thing, I don't know if it's that Hollywood started ignoring the Western market and then we stopped going to the movies, or we stopped going to the movies and then they started ignoring us. It's difficult to say. There certainly have been some truly huge blockbusters, pre-lockdown era. So I think, the West will still show up. Obviously, Endgame was gigantic, but the West will still show up for good movies. I think Tenet would have done well in the theaters, even though I find that movie to be only average. Some people really love it, though, and I still think it would have done well in the theaters, regardless of how people would have reviewed it. Black Widow, had that have dropped before the lockdowns, I think it would have probably done somewhere around $700 million bucks. Now it's relegated to just, content for Disney Plus and their 100 million paying users. But Disney keeps trying. I mean, to give you a bit of context, if you go back to how Mulan failed, it was basically the exact same stuff. Mulan fizzled in Chinese cinemas. Here's why Disney's blockbuster retelling may have failed to land. Mulan might be a part of pop culture lexicon Western audience, but it's worth remembering that while Disney's animation was a hit internationally, it was released in 1998. It was a flop at the Chinese box office, despite being ostensibly a Chinese folktale. So it's no surprise that Disney's approach to the new Mulan movie with the Chinese market front in mind, it cast big names Chinese actors like Donnie Yen, Gong Li, and Liu I Hate Hong Kong chick, and adjusted the story for less romance, a whole kiss, and more patriotism. They obviously, were leaning into, look, a film could completely flop here in the West and still make $1 billion in the Chinese market. That's just the way it is. And that's fine. Keep doing that crap. I don't want to give you my money anyway. Remember, in the actual credits of this film, they thanked the propaganda agency in charge of covering up the fact that they have work camps that has had, 1 million plus Uyghur Muslims pass through them, where they're sterilizing men and doing other terrible things. So there's also China-specific release strategy while the English language version was released in Australia, US, Canada, a number of Western European countries on streaming services and Disney Plus, a Mandarin dubbed version of the film opened in Chinese cinemas on September the 11th. Even so, the film has fizzled on release. On its opening weekend, the Mulan box office in China was just 23 million compared to the 29.6 million Tenet took in its opening weekend. Surely calls to boycott the film have not helped, nor criticism of the lack of Chinese talent behind the scenes, but there's more to it than that. Obviously, this was one of those things where China got mad and they actually pulled the film because some people got offended by something. And then I think that kind of did it in. They had it pulled. I have no interest in a live action Mulan. I don't really care. It looked like a hidden Crouching Tiger, hidden ripoff to me. I don't think that the Chinese market cared that it was made by a bunch of white people. I think they cared that their government told them it was bad, that it didn't have the correct subtitles, and that every time the West tries to bend the knee, it ends up, backfiring. This is exactly, Hollywood censors film to appease China, report suggests. This is, setting a standard. Well, Doctor Strange back in 2016 whitewashed a major Tibetan character for fear of jeopardizing the title's success in China. The forthcoming Top Gun sequel, Maverick, also criticized for the, quote, mysterious disappearance of a Taiwanese flag. It's not mysterious. They're doing it to appease China. It's better to self-censor in Hollywood's minds than to go back and have to do it later. Now, Shang-Chi, the latest big budget Marvel film, is getting panned in China. Marvel Studios' new superhero movie, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, whose production and screening were postponed. Who cares? The 125-second trailer, why don't you just call it a trailer, revealed some aspects of the hero Shang-Chi's life, including his childhood, his rebellion against his father, and how he saved people running on a bus. There were also scenes featuring characters doing kung fu in their traditional Chinese attire. The trailer intrigued foreign Marvel fans and kung fu movie lovers, with some comparing it to the works of Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee, but the Chinese market appeared less excited. First of all, comparing this film to anything Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee did is absurd. These are two actors with catalogs, of high-quality films. I think Jackie Chan actually used to be a stunt double, or he played like a henchman with Bruce Lee too. They have a long history together, just like even Chuck Norris has a long history with Bruce Lee, teaching him kicks and stuff like that. All these people have, a huge history of films. This is a random nobody actor who is in a sitcom. No Marvel movie will ever be better than any Jackie Chan movie. And Jackie Chan's are kind of like, Bruce Lee is more serious. Jackie Chan is more like comedic at times. Obviously him pairing up with Chris Tucker and stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. Global Times found many Chinese netizens' first impression of the film was that the story associated with early 20th century novel featuring Fu Manchu, a representative of the Yellow Peril in the West. The connection already sparked controversy in 2019 when Marvel announced the project. On China's popular video platform, Bilibili, that must be some type of YouTube or something. Typical comments include, quote, as I said, when Marvel announced the casting, who they pick already said Hollywood will never change its stereotype of Asians, slanted eyes. After seeing the hodgepodge of Japanese ninjas, U.S. skyscrapers, gangs, and Chinese ancient swordsmen, my brain turned to mush, a nut user said, jokingly. Shi Wenzu, a Beijing-based film critic, told the Global Times on Tuesday that the movie could be sold to some for its, quote, oriental elements, and that the presence of Tony Leung, who plays the role of Shang-Chi's father, but whether it can be a success depends on the story. It's going to flop. Some Chinese netizens compared Shang-Chi to Mulan, another movie that had ambitions to conquer the Chinese market, but eventually failed in both box office and reputation. Disney messed up the well-known Chinese story in live-action film Mulan. While its poor artistic level and misrepresentation of the Chinese culture led to its failure, she believed that if Shang-Chi movie could tell a good superhero story, it could still succeed among certain groups of moviegoers. Well, certainly there are, if you're trying, there are lots of Chinese people in the world in general that are not in mainstream China, that are less traditional, that you could still appeal to. But this is what happens. Like, how much of this movie is really, they focus on the audience rather than making a good movie. And I think that this is a huge mistake. Art is basically devoid in mainstream cinema. It's now all formula. The Marvel formula has been the same. It's been repeated year after year. DC's been trying for whatever reason. I don't know why DC just doesn't do the exact same thing. It would be just as profitable, yet they continue to resist that. Sony Pictures with Spider-Man uses the Marvel formula now, obviously. And it's fine. It's just a stupid popcorn cape film. But ultimately, it's not going to say anything interesting. And if Disney thinks, the thing is, Shang-Chi, it's difficult because if like movie theaters had never closed in a world where that happened, I would argue that Shang-Chi would probably be a total flop in the United States. And I also think now that Black Widow would flop. Probably not at the time, but we've gone a really long time without a mainstream Marvel movie, and I just don't know who cares about Phase 4. Like, who's paying to see the Eternals? I'm not saying nobody, but I mean, nobody? Who's paying to see Shang-Chi? I mean, it's a generic action film with a hero that literally nobody in the mainstream has any idea who it is. So, I mean, even hardcore Marvel fans probably don't know his lore. So, did they pick the character because they thought, wow, this is a really interesting story we want to tell? Or did they pick it because they're like Machina bucks? Some observers said Shang-Chi's lack of visibility in the MCU and debut in theaters at the moment seem to be a metaphor of systemic invisible discrimination against Asians in the U.S. and recent... What? What? It's just a popcorn superhero movie, which means it's tailored to the mainstream ideology of the United States. If you see Asian stereotypes in it, it's right because that's American society, a Twitter user posted. Most stereotypes are based in some level of truth about whomever. Not all of them are harmful. Certainly some of them are. Many of them are. But this actor, by the way, I'm losing more and more respect for him as now he's bent the knee to Nicki Minaj fans, singing one of her songs on his Instagram. Like, that was truly pathetic. So I don't know. I have no interest in it, and I certainly hope that Disney continues to lose money with this formulaic garbage. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.